Who inspired you the most to pursue social change?
I have to say, at its core, it was both of my parents. And, um, you know, both my parents came from very little and were, kind of incredible American dream stories, and my mom, who grew up Portland, Maine, okay, and in the 30s and 40s, and who ended up dedicating her life to helping low-income and minority students get to college. She ended up, spent many years in the education policy world, and she actually, she passed away about a year ago, but was she sort of known as one of the mother of Pell Grants, helping to get that legislation through. Which has paved the way for over 1 million kids to get to college. And so she not only was as someone who really valued the early work I was doing as a social entrepreneur, and gave me not only inspired me but also encouraged me to dedicate myself fully. I was an executive at the National Basketball Association and was doing this on the side. And one of the things that she said to me was that as she encouraged me to go and dedicate myself fully to this work, was, look, if you got to go for it, because if everything fails, okay, whether that's your organization, your new marriage at the time, if everything fails, you can always come back home and move back into your room that you grew up in. Too many of our folks do not have mothers or friends who are telling them, hey, you got to take that more risky opportunity, whether that's a startup, a tech startup or social entrepreneurial startup, because very few folks are being told that if everything fails, you can just come back home. So that really inspired me, and it also inspired my work to create the environment where more people, young people with talent who come from underserved communities, have believe that they have a backup plan and have the confidence to go for it and pursue what they're really passionate about.
It's interesting to hear you talk, John. I've had so many influences, but the thing I want to highlight is more of an event than a person. In the 4th grade, I had been tapped. I grew up in Massachusetts public schools, and I had been tapped for a program that was then called the Talented and Gifted Program. And students were chosen seemingly at random, really with significant discretion from teachers. It wasn't just grades, but they had discretion to choose which students, would get pulled aside and really be on an advanced curriculum. And I was a good student, but I think the message that I got, that I was talented and gifted, was not as important as the message that other students got, which is that they were not talented and gifted. And I had grown to have real resentment, frankly, for that moment, because through no fault of my own, I got an opportunity to get a level of investment from teachers and counselors and heads of school and so forth. The recommendations that were written to me, I was a student who was put on a track, and other students were tracked. And as I thought about that, and as I've grown and sort of experienced more life opportunity, I've always returned to that moment as a pivotal point where my life really turned. And it made me really work my heart out on behalf of education reform, and to really continue to help people understand that the link that has traditionally existed between income and zip code and student achievement can be separated, and it certainly was in my case. But that's not a belief that's held everywhere, as given your work. And so that pivotal point in my life stands out as an example that if we thought about the world differently and experienced this mind shift, that every student really does carry potential, in our job as educators and as adults is really to help them unleash their fullest potential. If we really thought that way, we'd invest in our education differently. And by that, I don't mean money. By that, I mean a sort of full spectrum especially encouragement and accountability for students to reinforce the belief that they can be something maybe greater than they themselves can see at that time. I got that chance, and so many other students just don't.
What do you think the most pressing problem that we've got with respect to our communities today, and where do we need to be investing in ultimately when it comes to solving some of these problems that are holding back our country, or or holding back segments of our country that you care about most?
I think of all the things that you could worry about, from education to access to healthcare, to transportation, the thing that starts to worry me most is income inequality writ large, where wealth concentration and opportunity concentrates, and it's self-reinforcing. And like I said, there aren't obvious places to reverse that. Not only is it does it have real implications for the life's chances for the vast majority of Americans born, into this context. But it's also growth limiting for the country. It's suboptimal in almost every single way.
I would have answered that question from a different lens, but around the same themes. That with respect to economic mobility, and just which is also kind of a proxy for how we think about the American dream. Our original virtues and so forth. And I think that that in our world, in my world, we're working hard to help low and moderate income minority students, who have overcome obstacles to get to college, to get on track, to be the stars in their family, to make sure that they close the deal on economic mobility after they get to college, make sure they can get a job that they couldn't have gotten out of high school, and that puts them on a trajectory where they can not only move the needle in terms of economic mobility for their families, but for they can get to platforms like where you are, where you can move the needle for thousands of people.